Okay, so today we're going to tackle a really tough chapter of history. We're going to break down how a mission that was sold to the world as humanitarian became one of the most brutal, terrifying colonial regimes imaginable. Let's get right into it.
This right here, this was the sales pitch. These were the words of King Leopold II of Belgium. It sounds mobile, right? A promise to bring progress and enlightenment. But behind that single sentence was a reality built on absolute terror. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
So yeah, let's start at the very beginning, with the promise that was made to the entire world back in the late 19th century.
Now this is the first thing you really have to wrap your head around. The Congo Free State, it wasn't a Belgian colony. Not really. It was the private property of one guy, King Leopold II. He personally owned a chunk of land 76 times bigger than his own country, and he had total, absolute control, all under the beautiful disguise of philanthropy.
But that philanthropic mask, well, it didn't stay on for long. It was ripped off to reveal the real engine of the Congo Free State, profit. And the key to all that profit came down to one thing: rubber.
Let's be really clear about what this means. This was not a job. You didn't get paid. The source here calls it forced labor, but in reality, it was just slavery, sanctioned and run by the state. The entire population was effectively turned into a massive workforce to strip their own land of its wealth, for a king thousands of miles away.
And you can see just how systematic this whole nightmare was. First, they set quotas that were basically impossible to meet. Then, step 2, everyone, men, women, it didn't matter, was forced to drop everything, their farming, their families, just to go into the jungle and collect rubber. And if they came up short, well, that's step 3. The punishment was horrific, and it was designed that way to terrorize everyone else into working even harder.
A system of labor this brutal can't just exist in a vacuum. It needs to be propped up by an even bigger system of control. And that system has a name: colonial terror. Just let that sink in for a second. It wasn't a government. It wasn't really a state. It was a system of terror. The whole point of the administration, its primary function, wasn't to govern. It was to create fear, because fear was the tool they used for economic extraction.
And here's the blueprint for how it worked. At the top, you had the king with his absolute, unquestionable power. The entire policy of the state was geared toward one thing and one thing only: making money. To enforce it all, Leopold had his own private army, the Force Publique, and they were the ones carrying out these atrocities. And finally, and this is so important, the brutality wasn't random, it was systematic. It was the very engine that made the whole monstrous machine run.
So, when you build an entire state on a foundation of pure terror, what's the final outcome? What is the ultimate price that the people living under that regime have to pay?
Let's go all the way back to that original promise, to civilize the Congo. Let's ask a really blunt question. What did that mission actually cost the Congolese people?
The answer is mass death. Just a staggering, unimaginable loss of life. We'll probably never know the true numbers, but historians estimate that the population of the Congo may have been cut in half during Leopold's rule. And this wasn't just from the violence itself, but from the starvation and the diseases that ripped through communities when their entire society was shattered for the sake of collecting rubber. And all of this leaves us with one last haunting question. How does a mission that is sold to the world as a beacon of hope become a state whose only real function is terror? Well, this explainer shows us how. It begins when unchecked power and limitless greed are allowed to hide behind the language of virtue.